Elementary music teacher friend, you love what you do, but you might feel unappreciated and, in fact, unseen some days. You may even feel like you're on a music teacher island and just want to connect with other music teachers who can relate to both your struggles and wins when it comes to teaching elementary music. I get you and understand completely the feelings you're having. That's why each and every week, the Elementary Music Teacher Podcast will provide you with solo and guest episodes that will help you realize you're not alone in your music teaching journey. Throughout each episode, my goal is for you to be able to walk away with actionable steps and ideas to help you feel like you're ready to take on the new week with whatever challenges may be thrown your way. Hi, I'm your host, Jessica Peresta, and I'm so glad you're here. Whether you're at home, in your car, in the shower, or wherever else you're listening, grab your cup of coffee or whatever other beverage is nearby and listen in to the Elementary Music Teacher Podcast.
I'm Ann, co-host of Transparency in Teaching, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now. Shows on the network are individually owned, and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Hey friend, I am so excited to invite you to a free 3-day challenge called the Reflect and Renew Challenge. In this free challenge, you'll begin to think about teaching elementary music in a new way. In just 3 days, you'll go from feeling overwhelmed to confident, and will surround yourself with other music teachers who will support and encourage you. Day 1 is all about reflecting. You'll reflect back over where you're at in this school year and identify the highs and lows, no matter if you are joining this challenge at the beginning, middle, or end of the school year. We start with reflecting first in order to move forward successfully. Day 2 is all about processing. You'll process through what it is you need to focus on to make your music teaching situation successful. Then day 3 is all about renewal. You'll break through mindset beliefs while setting goals and action steps to help you meet them. Each day of the challenge, I will go live inside of the challenge Facebook group. You'll be getting a daily challenge email that will contain action steps for you to take, and you're going to get to know other music teachers who can encourage you and support you along your journey. If you cannot make it live to the challenge for the next dates coming up, you can still sign up because you'll still get the challenge emails that are full of so much inspiration. You do not want to miss them. So still sign up. And also you can watch the Facebook Live replays if you can't make those live as well. So simply head to subscribepage.com/reflect and renew challenge to save your seat. And I'll see you there. Hi, friend. Welcome back to the Elementary Music Teacher Podcast. I'm so excited to have you back. And no matter when in the school year or even the summertime you are listening to this episode, you are going to find the information I'm going to present to you valuable. Now, this episode is not going to be exactly what you're going to learn at the Reflect and Renew Challenge that I mentioned at the very, very beginning of the episode, but it is going to be in alignment with it. So you're going to get some nuggets from this episode that are not in the challenge and things from the challenge that are not in this episode. So the episode is why reflection, processing, and renewal is so important. And if you're kind of like, what in the world is she talking about? Stick with me because I am going to go into detail about what I mean. And it's going to make sense, hopefully, to you before you leave today. Now, I used to do a Reflect and Renew challenge. Actually, I've done it 3 other times, and I only used to do it in the winter. We would, in the middle of the school year, look back at the beginning of the school year, think about where you were, and set goals to move forward the rest of the school year. But I started thinking about, I feel like reflection and processing and finding renewal is important for any time throughout the school year, even in the summertime. I honestly feel like giving you time to really kind of concentrate on where you're at, where you've been, where you want to go is constantly important. And finding time to do that is hard, but that's why I want to carve out time, obviously, in this episode, but also in the challenge. But also, even if you don't participate in the challenge or you only listen to a little bit of this episode, just giving you the skill set in order to be able to do this on your own. And I'm going to explain to you why it matters so much to me, why it's important. And honestly, this is what I also do for myself. I am constantly reflecting on my teaching life. I'm going back into teaching in the fall. And when I was in the classroom, I also did this. Exactly what I'm telling you to do. I did this. And I cannot explain to you in detail about how much it truly did help me. It went from me feeling like I was constantly on a treadmill, where, it just kept speeding up and speeding up. You see those memes of people flying off the treadmill because it just keeps going faster. And that's how I felt. I felt like, oh my gosh, like I never feel like I'm able to take a deep breath, or I feel like I'm never able to really stop and assess what's going well and what's not going well. And so once I started doing these strategies I'm going to present to you in this episode, not like everything went perfectly well. Nothing ever will, but I felt like I was able to stop and take a breath a little bit. I was able to really stop and see what's going okay, what's not, how to shift and pivot, and how to move forward. I have actually also applied these strategies, not just to teaching, but in my business while working with teachers one-on-one or in a group setting. As a mom, I have 3 boys. They all have different personalities, and I did that just this week, honestly, with my oldest, who's 13. There was something that wasn't working. And instead of continuing to move forward in this cycle of this particular area was not working between him and I, knowing how to parent him, I don't have all the answers, to be honest. It's just true. I say you leave the hospital and they hand you this baby, and you're not handed a brochure that says, here, do this. You just figure it out as you go, honestly, just like a teacher. And so what I constantly do in parenting as well is stop and say, this isn't working. Let's see if there's a reason why. Let's look backwards. Let's look presently, and let's figure out how we're going to move forward in the future. And that's constantly how I honestly do that. I do it as a wife as well, but I wouldn't say as much. Marriage is a different ball game. But anyways, so let's go ahead and just dive in, because I want to explain to you each of these 3 areas, why they're important, why they matter, and how you can easily do this, even if you're in this season of, I don't have a lot of time. I literally am coming in early to school. I'm staying late. I rarely get a plan time. On the weekends, I'm too exhausted to even focus on teaching. And let's be honest, I don't want to sometimes. I want to just take a break. But with that said, this does not have to take long. I'm not sitting here saying take an hour a day doing these things. What I am saying is one thing that really works for me well, and I'll talk about this more in the Reflect and Renew challenge, but one thing that works really well for me is really looking at my calendar for the entire month and also for each week, and really being strategic with where do I have those open pockets of time where I'm either going to, let's be honest, be lazy and take a nap or lay in the hammock outside, go on a walk, read a book, watch a Netflix show, and just completely veg out. Or I'm going to do these other things where I am stopping and processing and journaling and making lists of what I need to get done. And I really do. I know that sounds really nerdy and weird, but that's how I do it. I look at my calendar and I strategically say, this is when I'm going to get this done. I do the same thing for meal planning every week. If I don't do that, we're just going to eat more fast food. And let's be honest, it's baseball season right now. We do that anyways, because I give myself grace in areas. It's about giving yourself grace, but it's also about being strategic with the calendar and saying, when can I really stop and devote time to what Jessica's telling me to do? The same way you sit down to lesson plan and you carve out time to do that. The same way you carve out time to do assessment and figure out better ways to assess your students in more efficient ways. The same way that you have to carve out time to set up your classroom or arrange it in a different way for whatever activity you're doing with your students, and so on and so forth, is the same way this area gets forgotten about. The carving out time to really do self-assessment of what's working well, what's not working well, and how you want to keep moving forward is important to stop and do this. I do this in my home life. I already mentioned in parenting, but even in the house, I do this with What's working around here? Oh my gosh, it's getting messy. Do we need better systems in place? What do we need to do on Sunday night to set ourselves up for success for the week? In my business, I'm constantly stopping and saying, and I've pivoted and adjusted so much. If you've listened to this podcast for the past 4 or 5 years, you know that the episodes have even changed. The topics have changed. The length of the episodes have changed. I am constantly pivoting and adjusting and adapting based on what I think needs to be done. And this doesn't just happen on a whim. It doesn't just happen by chance. It happens because I'm strategic and allowing myself time to just literally sit in silence or with a pen and a piece of paper or with a blank Google Doc. And I really just process through. I brain dump. I think. I strategize. And so we're going to talk about ways you can do that as well. And what works for me won't always work for you. But my goal with anything on this podcast is to just give you ideas that you can take even just one snippet from an episode and apply it to your life. All right, so I've babbled on enough. Let's jump right in. Let's talk about reflection first. What do I mean by reflect? When I'm talking about reflection, no matter where you're at, even though this podcast episode is coming out in May, maybe you're listening to it at a different time of the school year, or maybe you are listening to it in May. But I want you to reflect means to look back. You're reflecting. Yes, we talk about New Year's resolutions, which are important, but reflection to me is, all right, I'm in May. How did April go? How did March go? What went well? What could have gone better? What were the highs? What were the lows? With individual students, with individual classes, with individual grade levels, with different lessons you've presented, with maybe you've implemented a new technology. Maybe you tried out a new unit that you've never done before. Maybe you're using a new curriculum and you're just kind of in the throes of it and you haven't had time to really stop and process. Okay, I really didn't like that activity so much. My students didn't really connect with it, or they did. So that's what reflection is. It's giving yourself time to really stop and look backwards. How far back do you look? Well, that's up to you. I would suggest don't look back further than a couple months at a time. Then during the summer is a perfect time to look back on the entire school year of like kind of what went well and what didn't. But to me, also reflection is even looking back as soon as yesterday. I think honestly, as you're lesson planning each week, and I've talked about this before, and I have an entire course about curriculum design now, but we've talked about backwards planning, which is looking at the entire year and going backwards. So when you're doing that and you're planning week to week based around your curriculum map and scope and sequence, well, how do you know where to go? You don't know where to go unless you know where you've been. So as you're lesson planning each week, you're going to look back the week before and say, do I need to keep going with a certain standard or concept, or did my students grasp it okay? Is one class ready to move on and another is not? Do I need to do more review for that certain concept? Do I need to help connect the dots between one concept and another? That is what I mean by reflect. It's also looking at classroom management, which I have heard from teachers across the board. Students are different this year than ever before. But what I do want to say is, although this generation learns differently, although it seems like their focus, reality is their focus is not what it used to be. They're not our generation. They are not meant to sit still and just sit there and, like back in the day when we would just sit and flip pages in a book in music class and sing the next song. The students of today, no, I don't know your individual circumstance. That's where one-on-one coaching comes into play. I don't know what you are dealing with. So I am not saying what you're dealing with in your particular situation at school is not valid. It is. So the classroom management issues are real. And I know just saying form a relationship with the students. Well, if you have a student that's throwing chairs across the room or intentionally breaking your instruments, that's a whole different issue altogether. And I have been there, done that. I had students fighting in my classroom. I had blood on my floor one time from a fight. I had a student throw a chair at me. I have dealt with those issues. And what I can say is I did this, going back to reflecting. I said, you know what? I'm not doing this, not quitting, but I'm not doing this day in and day out. I am not going to just accept that this is the status quo and that, oh, well, this is just how the students in this school act according to other teachers in my school building. I said, nope, not in my room. It's not going to be an overnight fix, but this is not going to be the culture that I'm setting in here. So what I did is I reflected on when that situation happened, what were we doing? What could I do for better pacing in my classroom? What is not resonating with the students? How are they so off task? Am I talking too much in here? Am I not giving clear enough instructions? Am I creating learning opportunities that maybe my students aren't enjoying as much as I thought they would? And that takes time to figure out. But so whether it's lesson planning, whether it is classroom management, whether it is maybe you put on some performances that you were like, oh, I thought that would go better and it wasn't really what I thought it would be. Maybe it is the pacing in your lessons throughout the class period that you're wanting to focus on more. I want you to reflect back. And like I said, look at a month or even a week at a time. And I would just honestly get out old school pen and paper. Pen and pencil. Pencil and paper, and really start writing out those thoughts. Think about April if you're in May right now. If you're in a different month, think about the month before and say, first of all, remember, I just did an episode about how the school year is a marathon, not a sprint, on purpose. Because if you're in the month of April, it's going to naturally just be a crazier season than normally. It just is. So first of all, identify where you're at in the school year, and that will give you an aha moment of, okay. I actually saw, I don't know if it was on TikTok or Instagram reel, but which are pretty much the same, but this person was talking, she's a teacher, and now I can't remember who it was, sorry, but she was talking about, is it April or am I ready to quit? Is it April or am I overwhelmed? Is it April? And she kept saying, is it April or, and then put a description in the blank after it. And I thought, man, that is so true. And that's what I'm trying to get across to you guys, that April is just a crazier season. So on this paper, you're saying, identify what month it is, first of all, and then say, okay, in the marathon Jessica talked about, I'm towards the end of the race. So that's just naturally going to be probably a harder season, a busier season, an overwhelming season. Then I want you to identify, pick one or two areas. Maybe it's something I just mentioned. Maybe it's something else I didn't mention. And you're going to identify where, reflecting backwards, like, man, that it could be a lesson, a unit. It could be something to do in your personal life. It could be something to do with you're not feeling like you're connecting the dots between what you're teaching and assessing your students. I don't know what it is for you, but identify one or two areas. And as you're reflecting back, then we're going to get into the next part, which is processing. You've looked back not too far, even as little as yesterday, right? As soon as yesterday. And now we're going to process. This is the part where you're going to focus on what you need to do in order to move forward to make music teaching successful. So if you picked an area like lesson planning, well, we're not going to look at lesson planning for the entire year. We're going to look at a month ago. And where was the breakdown happening with lesson planning? If you feel like it could have been a high, it could have been going great. And if so, write that down as well. When you're reflecting, it doesn't have to just be the negative. I said focus on the highs and the lows. So let's talk about both of those. If you're processing through lesson planning in April and you're like, where were the lows? Okay. I feel like my students were a little bit more squirrely than normal. Okay. So in April, maybe I need to focus on doing a little bit more movement. Maybe I need to have them do more activities throughout the lesson plan, so they're not doing so much sitting. Maybe April is when I'm letting them tell me what music they want to learn, or I'm bringing in more popular music, or I'm doing more bucket drumming, or I'm doing something new with my students they haven't done before. Maybe that's what you're looking at. Or maybe if it was already a high, circle that, write it down, so you remind yourself of that next April in a year from now, if the next school year, April, is not going as well. Remind yourself of how well it went last year so you can say, wait, what did I do? Why did that go well? And if it doesn't, maybe it's just because that group of kids moving up to a new grade level, sometimes that changes the ballgame, right? It just does. And so process through what you need to do to make sure you move forward successfully. Processing through everything, if you've blocked on your calendar, like I said, time to just sit and quiet, think about these things, you can't process through everything. So, what I want you to do is process through the one or two things you put on your list about reflection and start processing through what you can do, what's in your control, and what's out of your control. What is in your control are things you can change, things that you can do to move the needle forward. It's not going to be everything, but pick one or two things in order to change moving forward. By the way, when we're talking about processing, I was at this mom's group at my church. It was like this mom's night, and this counselor came and spoke. And one thing she said that really, really resonated with me, and when we're talking about processing through what's working and what's not working, is maybe one of the things that is not working is when we're talking about certain students or even colleagues in your building. Well, sometimes those are things that you can't control. And I'm going to tell you what she said in a minute, but what you can't control is the fact that if this student, I'm just going to pick one, let's say his name's Johnny, and he is that child who is throwing chairs in your classroom. Well, you can't really control that he did that. You can start controlling yourself, maybe the way you reacted, which is, let's be honest, throwing a chair across the room at you. You're going to react probably not like I wasn't like a happy camper, like, oh, well, there must be something going on there. In that moment, no, that's not my thought process. But what I did process through later on was I'm going to talk to his classroom teacher and see what's going on there. I'm going to have a conversation with him one-on-one to just say, hey, what made you so angry? I'm going to process through thinking about what are ways I can make sure, first of all, he's not by a chair again, but second of all, what are ways I can help him to maybe not be so angry about a situation, or give him strategies in order to walk away or to let him calm down a little bit before he gets to that point. So this counselor at that mom's night I was telling you about, she said, she calls it this circle. What is in your circle that you can control? And she had us draw a circle and write in there. Like, I mean, anything, of course, going on with my own life. Like, I can control that. I'm not always. There's things out of your control, but I can control my emotions, what I say, how I speak, how I react. And then she said, now, outside of this circle are things you can't control. And I even had to write my kids, my husband, students, the other teachers I work with. I can't control that. I can control me and the way I react and the way I respond, but I can't control that. So while you're processing through what worked well and what didn't maybe work as well, write that on your list as well. If you're thinking of a certain class, you can't control that. Their behavior is not your fault. Their behavior is not anything caused by you. What can you control, though, about that situation? You can control the way you respond, the way you plan, the way you aren't giving up, the way you're trying new strategies, the way you are looking for new songs and activities to do to reach those students. And eventually you will find something that clicks. So I don't know who needed to hear that, but I hope you found that helpful. The last word I want to talk about, which we're going to go way deeper in these strategies in the challenge I mentioned, is renew. Okay, so you've looked back, you've reflected, you're processing. Now you're going to think about, okay, how will this help me renew? And what do I mean by that? Renewing is being able to tackle through those mindset beliefs you have about yourself. I'm not good enough. If I had done A, B wouldn't have happened. If I had known how to lesson plan better, my students would not have as many classroom management issues. Or I should have known this song to teach instead of this one. These teachers are teaching it better than me. Whatever those mindset beliefs going through your head, I've tackled them on this podcast before, but I want to remind you, first of all, mindset beliefs are real. We all struggle with them. I feel like I'm doing a great job with mindset beliefs, and then all of a sudden, bam, this negative thought comes in my head. And I'm like, where did that come from? They sneak in when you're least expecting it. And what I want you to not do is to let it fester and sit in your brain and take root and to make you believe that these thoughts are true. What I do want you to do is let yourself think and process through them. We just talked about the word process, but then don't let them sit there. You process through those mindset beliefs, see, why am I thinking this? And then move on. Okay. Renewing is also about setting goals and finding action steps to help you meet those goals. So you're thinking about, okay, I've already talked about lesson planning, so I'm going to just stick with that. If you've processed through lesson planning and you're saying, okay, I have identified the highs and lows, what went well last week, what could have gone better, or yesterday, or a month ago. Well, what is my goal now with lesson planning? Is my goal to have better transitions? Is my goal to have some warm-ups that I like a little bit better? Is my goal to implement more movement activities? Is my goal to have more body percussion stuff that my kids like to do? Is my goal to be able to have better composition activities, maybe by integrating technology? I'm inserting some just random thoughts here, but whatever it looks like for you, what are your goals? Then you're going to develop action steps to move forward with those goals. Because if you don't ever implement action steps or know what the action steps are to get to that goal, they're not going to happen. And you're going to stay stuck in this repetitive cycle of, okay, oh my gosh, I'm not doing a good enough job, or I'm just a failure at lesson planning. No, you're going to stay stuck in that cycle if you do not do these things I'm talking about in this episode. Now, how long do you have to sit there reflecting and processing and finding renewal? It doesn't have to take long. It can be once a week for 5 minutes, just jotting down some quick thoughts, the notes app on your phone, on a journal, on a sticky note, or just think through it. You don't even have to write it down if that's not your style. It's okay. But I really want you to think about what I've said in this episode and how you can do your own process of, speaking of the word process, of reflecting, processing, and renewing. Then join me for the challenge where I'm going to go way deeper into this and give you even more strategies and talk about each of these in way more detail. And I hope that you can join me. If not, please know that I'm here to support you. Ask me any questions, by the way, about this episode, because I know I went all over the place, but I also hope, like I said at the beginning, or somewhere in the middle, that you are able to even just take away one strategy that we talked today about and implement it into your teaching life. Have a great rest of your week, and I will see you soon. Well, hey there. Thank you so much for listening into the Elementary Music Teacher Podcast. There is an exclusive Facebook group just for listeners of this podcast and any elementary music teacher called the Elementary Music Teacher Community Facebook Group. Come on over and join us there, where we have conversations around the podcast episodes and encourage each other each and every week. And also head to my website, thedomesticmusician.com. I have some free resources there that you can download to help you gain traction in your classroom today, as well as the blog and the membership site and all kinds of other goodies to help you keep going in your music teaching journey. I cannot wait to keep connecting with you and encouraging you and spurring you on in your journey of teaching elementary music. Hang in there, have an amazing week, and I will see you soon.